Blog Talk Radio.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. We've got a great show for you tonight, this Thursday, October the 12th. Going to be starting things out here with another great round of Coach's Corner, and then I'm going to be joined by a great guest in the second half of the show, and I'll tell you a little bit about that here in just a moment. But let me just remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursday nights from 6 to 8 p.m. Central here on the blogtalkradio.com network. And for those of you just tuning in for the first time, obviously you found us. But for those that maybe aren't familiar, the best way to find us is go to blogtalkradio.com, and up in the search key, just type Golf Talk Live, and that will take you to the main page. And, of course, you can listen live every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central. And for those of you that maybe can't join us live, if you just follow that link, blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, or again, just type Golf Talk Live up in the search key, scroll down the page to the on-demand section, and all of the shows are also auto-recorded. So you can always go in after the show has gone off from the live broadcast, and you can listen at your convenience when it's, convenient for you. So, but glad that those of you joining us live tonight are able to tune in. Also, if you're interested in listening maybe under a different social media platform, you're welcome to go to itunes.com or stitcher.com. And again, under the podcast section, just type in Golf Talk Live, and you'll find us there. For those that maybe like to listen under a different network, you're welcome to do so there. Also, if you're interested in calling in or speaking with any of the guests during the live broadcast on Thursdays, you can do so by calling area code 646-716-4667, or you can email me questions or comments to ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And if you're somebody that's in the golf profession, whether you're a coach, a teacher professional, or maybe an entrepreneur, or somebody that's maybe written a great golf book that you'd like to share with the audience here, I'd be more than happy to get together with you and set something up. So you can also reach out to me at my email, ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And as always, I update on social media on Facebook and also on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Ted and Buck CEO, CEO in capital letters. And thank you to all of the recent followers, by the way. And also on LinkedIn.com as well, under my personal page, as well as I said on Facebook on my personal page, and on the Golf Talk Live blog page. There on Facebook, you'll see all kinds of updates each and every week with my guests. But as I mentioned, we're going to start out here with a great round of Coach's Corner. I'll introduce the guys here in just a moment. And a little bit later on in the broadcast, I'm going to be joined by my very special guest, Mark June. He's the head coach for the Chattanooga men's golf team for the University of Tennessee, Go Mocs. And he'll be joining me here in the second half of the show. So I'm really looking forward to that. Very excited to have him on the show. But first and foremost, the Coach's Corner panel, let me introduce them. Tonight is Peter Egazarian. Peter is PGA and TPI Teaching Professional with the Traconic Golf Club. He's also the head men's golf coach with the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, and he's also the founder of the Northeast Golf Performance and a member of the Proponent Group. And filling in, originally John Hughes was going to be here tonight, but unfortunately he had to cancel late last night, so my good friend Mr. Pete Buchanan decided to step up and pitch in this evening, so he's going to be joining us here on the Coach's Corner panel. And Pete Buchanan, of course, as you all know, he's the founder and director of instruction and owner of the Plain Simple Golf LLC, which houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace. He's been teaching for well over 30 years, and essentially he's been simplifying his golf swing philosophy in an effort to make it easier and simple for players just like you to play this great game that we all love. So without further ado, got that out of the way, guys, welcome to Coach's Corner here on Golf Talk Live.
Thanks, Ted. It's great to be here.
Hi, Ted. Great to be here.
All right. Thanks, guys. And again, as always, thank you very much for giving of your time. I know it's not always easy. We all have a pretty full schedule during the day, and then to have to bounce and do Coach's Corner here on Thursday nights, I know sometimes isn't always easy. So thanks. And again, particular thanks, Pete Buchanan, for stepping up last minute like that. I appreciate it. All right, guys, as I said to you briefly off air, we're going to talk a little bit about playing to one's strengths. And essentially what I mean by that is, we all have strengths and weaknesses in our game. Some might be a great driver of the golf ball. Others maybe have a really good short game. Maybe it's just their putting is really strong. And I feel the best way to really capitalize on your game is to play to your strengths. So if your short game is your strength, you certainly want to practice your long game, but at the same time, you don't want to spend most of your time playing or practicing in an area that's the weakest part of your game, because when you get out in the golf course, it's not going to translate into some low scores. So we want to make sure that we always play to our strengths, and that doesn't mean that we negate or forget the other parts of our game, but you always want to capitalize on where the best parts of your game are. So Peter, just to keep things simple, I'm going to address you as Peter tonight, and Pete, I'll obviously address you as Pete. Peter, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, you've recently been drafted, if you will, to be the head coach for the golf team at the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, as I mentioned in the opening credits. So I'm going to start with you, and you've had a chance to sort of assess a lot of the players on your team. Talk a little bit about some of the differences in some of the strengths and weaknesses. And again, as I said to you before, you don't necessarily have to name names or anything like that, but what are some of the foundational strengths and weaknesses that you've uncovered so far?
Well, there's individual players have their own, track record in competition, their own preferences, their own, something even down to their favorite yardage to play into greens. And I just want them to really tailor their game to be, capitalize on that, to be as confident as possible. The more you talk to them and you talk through things, something like a unreachable par 5, it's, club selection is, on that second shot is very preferential, and it has to have, you're sitting there at the, 275 yard or 280 yard mark, and you need to have a conversation with that player about, what's your confident yardage you want to go into the green. Do you want to hit this as close to the green as possible because you feel really, very confident about your short game, your wedge play from 30, 40 yards. You feel like you can get it closest to the hole. Or, one of my players, wants to be laying back all the way to 150 yards because, he feels most confident with that club in his hand. He feels like he can get it right next to the hole. But really that's what I work with on the players on the team is embracing their strengths, whether it's a section of their game or something they're employing technically. All I do with them and, all the people I coach, whether they're, competitive, recreational, professional, is embracing the strengths that they have technically, reinforcing those. And frankly, I tell them flat out right off the bat, I'm like, I don't want to talk about what you're doing poorly or what you think you're doing poorly. Let's discover, where it's or why it's good, and let's discuss that. So it's not only the sections of the game, it's maybe something that they're not aware of them or why they're hitting good shots in that simplest of sense. And then if you don't know why you just hit that amazing shot and you sit there and say, how do I do that again? Then how can you possibly stand up to the ball with any confidence that you're going to reach your target or in most cases not go into the water or woods? So when you're talking about the college players, they all have existing games. I have them for 14 weeks or 15 weeks a year. So it's more about helping them understand their own strengths, embracing it, and playing to those. And, I always say that the easiest way to, not have a trouble shot is not to hit it there. So if you're
right.
So, and they laugh at that at first, but then they think about it and they realize how right that actually is. And so This is a really great topic for me tonight because this is what I do with people. I want them to embrace their strengths and not sit there and dwell on what they might think is a weakness. It's just not worth the time.
Yeah, and Pete, well said, Peter. By the way, and Pete, I think really it falls into the strategy of a player as well. I mean, having using and taking advantage of one's strengths in their game can help building a plan or a strategy. And this is something that the better players understand. Again, whether they're playing competitively or maybe in their local club championship, having a good game plan, if you will, can also ultimately lead to better ball striking, because as their confidence level rises, their ability to be able to understand what needs to be done, and that doesn't mean they're going to hit every shot crisp and pure each and every time, but it is going to elevate their confidence level. So talk a little bit about some of the things that maybe you try to do in helping your players or students that you're working with develop a better game plan, if you will, that ultimately is going to lend themselves to some lower scores.
What I always try to do is to get them before they're going to play around, whether it's their home club, whether they're playing tournaments, whether they're on the tour, is to look at the golf course first of all, look at every hole, and try to figure out on each one of these holes what's my best plan to make the best possible score on this hole. And right along these lines, it was great because I just had a conversation with one of my tournament players the other day, and he came back to me and he says, well, this golf course is I'm trying to shape my tee balls. And I said, well, how many holes on the course actually need you to shape it? He goes, well, none of them. I said, then why are you trying to shape them all? You're trying to do something that you're not comfortable with, that you really don't need to, because the course doesn't equate that you have to do that. So it's always looking at the golf course and try to set up for each hole, what you're trying to do, what the plan is. I like the fact that, par fives are great if you can hit them in two, but you got to look at the circumstances. What's the risk reward for each one that you're going to play? There's a hole that, I volunteer coach with the Missouri women's team, and there's a par five on their home course, or par four, I should say, that's got water on the left, and they keep, every time they mention that hole, they say, well, the water on number 5. And I go, there's water on 5? They go, what are you talking about? I said, well, I never see it. I don't know what you're looking at. So I don't even know it's there. So, if you're looking in it, you're probably going to hit it in it. So, you have to figure out on that hole, let's play a shot that won't even come near it. Well, let's take the water out of play. And, it's challenging because some of them from that front tee can, challenge the green because it's a short enough par 4. But, they make more doubles than they make birdies trying to go that way. So, and I always try to get them to look back too. And, we always want to dwell on the negative. But if they're making bogeys and double bogeys, I always try to get them to figure out, why are you having those scores on those holes? Look back at them and try to figure out, why did you make a double on that hole? Did you hit it out of bounds? Did you make a bad decision? Was it just poor contact? And so that way we can get a game plan together inside the game plan of how to better attack the course when, maybe things aren't going so great. What can we do? Tee off with a 3-wood versus the driver, use an iron. I always try to teach, players, you got to have a go-to shot. When the wheels fall off, you got to have something you can do. And there's got to be a shot in there that you can pull off at all times when, things are just going sideways. And it happens. Things do go sideways. We all know that. So I want them to have something they can go to, and that way they can stay within that game plan and make it work. And a lot of times I'll even have them divide, if they're playing 18, I'll have them divided into 6 3-hole tournaments. And let's play them 3 holes at a time. And let's try to get, depending on the level, if they're tour players, let's shoot 1 under par for every 3-hole segment. Then you shoot 6 under every time. So instead of looking at it, as a whole, let's split it up into segments. So, it's, as Peter was saying, you try to look at segments, whether it's parts of their game or the golf course, but trying to find out, what do they do best? How do we enhance what they do best? And then, in the meantime, how do we tweak along and take those areas that aren't as good and bring them up to speed? So, I think it's a great topic because, it's something that I think everybody needs to do. And the players that play the best are the most prepared, without question. I mean, they just prepare so well, and Tiger and Jack were 2 of the best.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Pete, and that's one of the reasons why I thought this would be a great topic of discussion tonight on Coach's Corner panel. Peter, as Pete was just talking about, obviously we want to focus on the player's strengths and that, and then be able to tweak on some of the areas that maybe are lacking a little bit. So we still need to make a plan really to help the players understand. And I know it's not always easy when you're, as you mentioned earlier, in your position, you're only seeing them for maybe 14, 15 weeks a season. So it doesn't give you a lot of time to really necessarily get into a full assessment. So you're working with really what you've got. But obviously you want each player to make their own plan, ultimately focusing on the stronger parts of their game. But we can't negate and forget the weaker areas either. They have to identify them and do that. So what do you try to do to help them make a plan to sort of attack both areas, obviously focusing more on the stronger parts of their game, but we still have to work on the other as well? What do you try to do to encourage them to develop their own plan of attack, if you will?
We start with, ensuring that quality of contact is there. That you're making that player is making the best quality contact they can possibly make, and we have an open discussion between myself and the player. During practice, I have the rest of the team practicing. I pull them aside. We do some work together for 20 minutes, kind of privately. This is one of the stations they're running through, and we have a discussion. I'm fortunate to own TrackMan, so we sit there. They hit some balls on TrackMan, and we talk about it. And we talk about their round. We talk about some shots they hit. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. Let's hit a few shots, and then just help them talk through and better understand their own game. And they have enough experience, at least at the competitive side and the college side, that they're going to come to their own realizations and say, okay, this is how, the contact can become better. This is why this certain outcome is happening. And then we can discuss a mechanism to change the outcome. That's all you can do is really have an honest conversation about just that being the sole focus. You're not, quote unquote, looking to do something correctly or the right way. You're looking to make a connection to what we're discussing to change the outcome. And that's the conversation I've had with the players on the team, whether they're senior starters or freshmen that are really just learning how to compete at the college level. That's the conversation. And if they have a very good understanding of how they can, a foundational piece of how they successfully put speed on the club and make, good quality contact and control their golf ball, then it changes. Their confidence level changes, their shot making ability changes, and then obviously the scores are affected. So I think if anything, it's been a very short time that I've been the coach of the college team, but even in that very short time, the players have a better understanding of their own game and why certain things are happening. So, when it comes down to that side of things, away from my professional coaching, and the professionals, and then the competitive amateurs, and then the recreational players, it's not too different. It's just that it's a different age group, a different level of maturity, and they're still discovering how they operate on the golf course. So it's cool.
Yeah, and really that self-awareness is critical, especially at that age. They're still starting out, and even though they might have some good competitive skills developed already, there's still a lot of room for growth. For the players. Self-awareness for every player to some level of self-awareness is extremely important. I would say there's a very, very small percentage of highly competitive players that if you gave them any level of self-awareness, they would be completely crippled. But I would say
for the majority of people, that just the awareness of why that good shot just happened can be a eureka moment for them, where they can find a whole different level of playing.
Yeah, and that's really, what really makes the difference too, I think, with some of your higher caliber players, Pete. The question a lot of people ask or should be asking themselves, and that is really, what are you looking for? What's your end game? In other words, what do you want to get out of your experience on the golf course? Whether it be recreational or whether it be competitive. And I think understanding what that end game is and what level you want to take yourself can really falls into obviously strategy, what we're going to talk a little bit more here in just a second. But I think answering that question for each individual is critical. And again, it goes back to playing to your strengths, knowing what your abilities are. So, that's a conversation, Pete, I know that you've had with students as well, is trying to, and that happens in the very beginning stages when you're doing their assessments, trying to find out what it is they want to accomplish. Would that be correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of times when, for instance, we'll have a high school player and then we'll ask them, what are your ambitions? Where do you want to go? And then, start to talk to them about, do you actually know what that's going to take? What types of shots you have to be able to hit? How much time you're going to have to practice? So they're aware of exactly what it's going to take to make it to that next level. And even going to the 25 who wants to become a 20 or the 40 who wants to become a 30, depending on where they are. It's giving them an understanding of, what parts of my game do I have to improve to get the scoring to go down? Obviously, the higher the handicap, the more room for improvement. And you can make a lot of strides with basic short game play. I mean, a lot of the higher handicappers, they take 3 or 4 to get to the green, then they figure out, well, what the heck, I've had this many already, so they don't really concentrate on the shorter stuff. And as you get them better with the short game, their full swing becomes better because they're more aware of ball control, more aware of the club face, more aware of things that are going on. So, yeah, I think, making them aware of, what is your, as you said, what is your end game? What do you want to do here? And where do you want to take your game to? And then let's sit down and talk about, okay, what's it going to take to make that happen? How you need to practice, what you need to practice, how you need to play, the things you need to look at, and even from reading books to watching videos to, learning more about mental golf, learning more about, different course strategies, course management. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can present to them to help them along and move them to the next level. But I think you're right. It's a lot of times they really don't realize, what exactly is necessary to make those leaps. And so we have to sit them down, and sometimes you have to tell them, and you don't want to really have to do it you try to keep it as positive as you can, but you just have to tell them, well, you're just not there yet. So here's what we have to do. If you want to get here, this is what needs to happen. And so I think you can turn it into a real positive and create a practice plan and an end game goal to get them there.
Yeah, and well said, Pete, by the way. The other thing, too, that I think a lot of times, and why I believe that last sort of question, if you will, is extremely important, is more often than not, I think a lot of people, and I'm obviously talking about our amateur golfers here or weekend golfers, really don't know what they want. A lot of times we'll hear, well, I just want to hit the ball farther, or, I want to be able to hit a little bit straighter, and that's great. But even if they accomplish that, is that going to resolve all of their issues? It's certainly going to help, but is that not really having an end game or really fully understanding what it is you want? And if you're just looking sort of for a quick fix or a Band-Aid solution to a lot of your issues and problems that you're dealing with out on the golf course, then you're truly not going to become a better player. So I'm going to ask both of you this question. Obviously, I'm looking for a yes or no answer, and you're certainly welcome to expand on that with any thoughts. But would this be a fair statement? Better players play to their strengths. Average players play or dwell on their weaknesses. Peter?
Yes. Yeah. It depends.
Would you agree with that? Yeah, as a general rule, would you agree that more of your better players tend to focus on the strengths of their game and their abilities that they know and confident out in the golf course. And amateur or high handicap players tend to focus on the last bad shot that they just played the hole before. They're not thinking about the better parts of their game or what they know they can do. They're thinking about all of the mishaps that have happened the last 3 or 4 holes. So that would be a yes then?
No, I would say no. I would say no, and it depends. It's kind of I think I've interacted with enough players on both ends of the spectrum or every end of the spectrum to know that there's plenty of very, very, very good players that dwell and don't have and dwell because they don't have a plan to move forward mentally, and then on a lot of times you'll have your recreational golfer that's a 15, 20 handicap that knows that they love putting or love, their short game and don't mind missing a green because they feel confident a chip and a putt is coming, or the fact that they know they only hit driver 130 yards, but they know it's going to be in the fairway. I don't think it's a fair statement. No.
Okay. That's an interesting answer, and there really is no, in my opinion, no right or wrong answer to that statement. Pete, what about your thoughts to that same scenario? Better players play to their strengths, and our higher handicap or our average players out there dwell more on their mistakes and don't focus on it. Would you agree with what Peter just said, that no, that's not really an accurate statement based on your experience as well, or do you differ?
Well, it's a yes and a no. In general terms, yes, better players tend to play to their strengths. You've got average or players that don't. But I think here's the bottom line to me is this: the players that play the best understand their games, and they don't dwell on the consequences. The players that have trouble dwell on the consequences. And that doesn't matter whether you're a tour player or whether you're a 25 handicap. Those that are worried about the consequences do not play to their top level because they're always worried about what if. I'm standing on the field. What if I hit it? I just don't want to cut this ball into the water. That can be a PGA Tour player, or it can be just the average player. So I think consequences. It's not uncommon, and I used to say this all the time when I was doing mental golf classes. I'd say, well, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, so I hope I don't 3-putt, and then you 3-putt and you ask yourself, God, I wonder why that happened. Well, that's exactly what you set yourself up for. So I sure hope I don't hit it in the water. There it goes right in the water. So you have to refocus your training and not really dwell on the consequences. And I know it's hard for the weekend players because they hit so many shots that are offline and they do hit those types of shots, but you want to try to refocus them on, again, going back to strategy. Okay, what's the best club in your bag? Oh, I hit my 6-iron great all the time. Well, then tee off with it. Let's get the ball in play. How many times have you played the par 4 where you hit 3 6-irons and make a putt? Let's change the game plan so that you can continue to work towards the things you do well and don't dwell on the things that you don't, because that's always going to eat at you at some point in time. And we've all been there. You hit 12 straight tee balls all day long. You're just crushing it, and you stand up on number 16, and there's water on the left, and there you go. So I hope I don't hook it in there. It's easy to do, because you look down the fairway and it leads you towards the negative. Somebody once told me that for every negative thought, you need like 4 positive ones to get it out of there. So, you may as well just focus on, what you're trying to do and what you need to do instead of worrying about the consequences of what might happen. So I think that's a big thing. And I've always noticed that the consequences, those that are worrying about them, just don't play as well as they can.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And I'm a firm believer in the power of self-talk. I think it doesn't matter whether it's golf or whether it's everyday life. I think that if you I believe in that law of attraction. If you're constantly, spewing out negative statements or comments all the time, you develop a sort of negative aura, and you attract that sort of negative response. So I believe in the power of self-talk, whether you're out in the golf course or elsewhere. But particularly out in the golf course, I think if you're, as you said, Pete, if you see water or you see some other obstacle out there on the golf course, and your main focus is on that obstacle, you're more than likely going to find yourself in some kind of trouble because you're not really going in with a good strategy. Which sort of brings me to the next question that I'm going to start you off with, Peter, and that is, should we have a strategy on the golf course, or should we just go out there and sort of play willy-nilly and hope for the best? What should there be a strategy when we're going out there, and when should we really be thinking about that, putting that strategy or plan together?
Yes, there definitely should be a strategy, and there should be a primary and a secondary strategy for going on the golf course. And, for the people that play the same golf course, you have a home club, you play there on a regular basis, you can have that be a standard plan, but, some days, you're like a pitcher that shows up to the ballpark feeling like they have their great stuff, and you get shelled in the first inning and you're on the bench. There's days like that for golfers too, where you show up and you just don't have, you're not really bringing your best stuff that day. You need to have a secondary plan that you can go to, kind of like Pete was saying, that, if you have to hit 3 6-irons to reach a par 4, then you do that. It's something that not only do you need that primary plan that you can do when you're controlling your ball, but you need to have that own personal secondary plan that you're going to, play to a strength and make your way around the golf course and, help you enjoy your round. Or if you're playing competitively, you need to have, an understanding of the golf course. Now, there's certain apps that you can use on your phone that can help you game plan right from your phone. It's not the same as getting a practice round, but, you can see yardages and fly over on Google Earth, and, you can really at least put together a primary game plan and something of a secondary game plan if it's necessary. But, a lot of competitive players are preparing themselves so well that they're controlling their ball. So that game plan is the most important one, and you always have a backup plan where you can just play to your strengths and get it done.
Yeah, and that also really, Pete, well said, Peter. I think also part of having a good strategy is being able to adapt to different situations that you might be fixed, which I think is what you're alluding to, Peter, when you're talking about a secondary plan. Is obviously if plan A, is starting off a little streaky, then you need to have somewhat of a backup plan, if you will. So Pete, let me ask you this. Obviously, you need to be able to adapt. You developed a strategy, as Peter just pointed out, to go and play the golf course. But as we know, that they don't always go. Plans don't always go as what we first hope. So we need to have a backup plan, or we need to be able to adapt to certain situations. So how do we handle that when the wheels fall off the bus, as it were? How do we sort of get ourselves back on track? And do we go back and try to regroup and follow that original strategy, or do we adapt and come up with a new strategy?
Well, it really depends. It depends on how many wheels fell off. If it's just a little bit shaky, they may be able to stick with the plan and continue going down the road. But I always like to let them know the one thing that you can always remember is loft is your friend. And the more loft you can put in your hands, the more control you can have over the ball. So when things start to go bad, you've heard me say this before. Now, they don't put the numbers on it anyway, but they used to put a 1 on the bottom of a driver. And, just because it has a 1 doesn't mean you have to keep hitting it first. You need to get something that's going to enable you to get off the tee and keep the ball in play when things aren't going well enough. I always tell them the story when I'm warming up before playing, the last probably 6 or 8 or 10 balls I hit it with the driver, just so I can see if I can use it. If I can't hit it on the range very straight, I'm not going to hit it off the first tee, because now I'm more nervous. So I'm going to put something in my hands that I have full confidence in, that I know I can hit in the fairway. And they need to develop those types of clubs. They need to know what they are. It's just a matter of, controlling the golf ball. And you you don't have to hit perfect shots to shoot low scores. You just have to get the ball in the hole. And you got to figure out a way to do it. So I always like them to have, when they're practicing hitting shots, I like them to go out and work at ball shapes, because I like them to hit them right to left, left to right, as well as straight shots. And I like them to know which one of these, if push comes to shove, if everything is all falling off and you got to take it, you have to hit this ball in the fairway, what shot are you going to hit? What's your go-to? And so I want them to understand what that is, so they can pull that out when they need to, when things just aren't going as well as they'd like to. But, as I said, the more loft you can put in your hands, the easier it gets. And, I've often, too, told them, play the holes backwards when you're practicing. If it's a 3-wood and a 9-iron, hit the 9-iron off the tee, 3-wood to the green. Just start to figure out, there's different ways to play every hole. So figure out, the ways to do it. Or take a par 4, divide it in half, and hit that club twice. Just different strategies to look at playing holes differently. And I think that in itself can then lend them into, okay, well, things aren't going well, but, I can hit 2 4-irons and be on this par 4. So let me do that, because the driver's gone sideways the first 4 holes. So as long as they have a backup that they have some confidence in, and they can develop that over time, then that would be, to me, the backup to put something in their hands that they know they can hit and play and then continue on.
Yeah, and again, well said. The other thing too, guys, is, and we've talked about this before on the show as well, I think a lot of amateur players particularly, need to sort of follow the words of Jack Nicklaus when he talked about, teeing it forward. A lot of players are still, trying to scramble from the back tees just because they don't want to give up, I guess that machismo, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. They don't want to give in and say, well, I'm getting a little bit older, but I'm up in my getting close to my mid 50s, and I can still hit a pretty decent ball, obviously, but even I recognize that I'm not going to hit it as far as I did when I was 25. And so, sometimes you have to make adjustments. That falls into strategy as well. Knowing what your limitations are, not just in your ball striking ability, but also in your distance control. If you're not hitting it as far as you used to be, there's no shame in, as Jack said, moving it up a set of tees, or even 2, depending on the circumstances. So that's something else that I think falls under strategy as well, is knowing what your limitations are as far as your abilities, and it's not just about strengths and ball striking. Another question, and Peter, I'm going to jump back to you here real quick. Something too that's a little different, and I think this falls into really both areas. Obviously, it acts as a strength for some of our better players, but also into strategy to know this information. And that is, better players are actually reading the greens before they're even standing on the green. And what I mean by that, let me just clarify. I know you guys know what I'm talking about, but just for the audience listening, a lot of players, as they're walking up or out in the fairway, they're looking at the lay of the land up around the green and on the green. They're looking to see where the pin is. They're looking to see, is it an elevated green? Is the green got some undulation in it? They're not waiting until they're getting up there walking. So this falls under strategy, of course, because they want to see where's the best position. So Peter, this is something I'm sure that you're working with some of the students and some of the collegiate students, particularly that you're working with on your team, is learning to recognize the lay of the land, if you will, when they're getting ready to make some of their approaches. So talk a little bit about that. What's the conversation that you're having with some of these guys on that preparation?
Yeah, it's a conversation we have in practice, just about gathering information. And it's not something, unless there's a few players that are, have been professionally taught or coached, during their junior golf years, and those players know. But still, it's something we discuss, and it's, there's some other things that we discuss about just gathering information about, and to be best informed to make, the most confident decision that you can. And that's also what I'm working on with, your other competitive amateurs, your recreational players, is how how to efficiently gather information so to help you weed through all maybe the stuff you've been told. I'll weed through the inputs that you've received into, what's constructive and what's not. We can compartmentalize those things, and then they're making not better decisions, but maybe more. They're gathering information at an efficient level so they can make a confident decision. That's it. And when I'm talking to them about that, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're looking for in them as well, is to make sure that they're making best use of gathering that information. Pete, that's something. What can amateurs learn, from that analogy, that the professionals and obviously some of the better players, as Peter just pointed out on his team, they sort of come second nature because they've been trained and taught what to look for. But a lot of amateurs don't. When they're out in the fairway, they see the flag, and they might look to see what are some things that they should be looking for when they're getting ready to approach the green. When they're looking down the fairway at the green, what are some things that they should be clearly trying to identify? What is useful information to them, and what's something that's really not really all that relevant or really going to make a big difference either way? What are your thoughts on that, Pete?
Well, first and foremost, I'd have them look at where the pin is and get them to understand that if the pin's all the way in the back, they could maybe take 1 or 2 or maybe 3 more irons to get it back there, depending on the depth of the green. So they have to understand that, how far is the pin actually from, what their yardage is? Because a lot of times they'll give them the yardage to the center of the green, but, they could still use another club or 2 to get back to where the pin sits. So I'd have them understand where the pin is first. Secondary, looking at the green and say, okay, if you happen to miss this green, what's a good miss and what's a bad miss? So, all right, well, there's bunkers left and there's a lake on the right. Well, if I'm going to miss it, I'd rather be in the bunkers. So, you have to look at, what's your ball flight tendencies. And so with that in mind, I'm not saying to play their miss, but they have to keep that in mind. If they do miss hit, what's the most penalty and how can we avoid that? And sometimes I'll tell them, okay, well, why don't we just lay up? We don't have to go for the pin and the green right now. Let's just set it over here to the left on the side, and then we can pitch one on and, put it up there and get out of this hole. So I want them to look at what's up there, not only from a sense of what trouble is, if there's a right or a good miss or a bad miss. And, for the last part, as you were talking about before, look at the green. How is it pitched? How does it sit? Are there mounds around it? Is the right side higher than the left side? Or is it, I can see the front of the green, but I can't see the back. Okay, well, that means, it may be running away from us. And so to get an idea of what the green is going to be like before they get up there. But I think, if they can understand, first of all, where the pin is relative to where they are in the yardage, that they may need more clubs to get back there. What are they looking at? Can they have a better miss? Yeah, they can. And then, what am I up against what I see from the fairway? What's it look like? What's the green look like? So when I get up there, I have a better idea of, kind of where I'm going to be able to play the putts or the chips or the little pitches, depending on where my shot ends up.
Yeah, and gathering, as both of you had mentioned, some great thoughts there as well, Pete. Really, I think both of you have really emphasized tonight on really not only the self-awareness, understanding about your abilities out in the golf course, but capitalizing on opportunities that present itself. If you've got an opportunity to study the hole and ahead of time, Peter, as you suggested, whether you do a Google flyover, over the golf course as you're taking a look at the yardages and some of the obstacles that you may be faced with out in the golf course, i.e. bunkers, small ponds or lakes, what have you, that's going to serve you well. Even if you're playing on a course that you're familiar with, you would be surprised by playing from different sets of tees how much different that course sets up. Playing from a more forward tee, sometimes different things that maybe weren't in play or are in play are no longer in play, or vice versa. So the course can change dramatically depending on where you're playing from. So it's always a good idea to sort of do that upfront assessment when and wherever possible. Also, Pete, as you just mentioned, when you're coming up on your approach shot, for every green, obviously you don't have a lot of time, and we're not trying to encourage slow play, but make use of that time while your partner is over there lining up and doing his thing. This is your opportunity to sort of start gathering that information and assessing, as you said, where's the pin? Is it cut in the back or is it in the front? And this is going to give you an idea of what club, because as you mentioned, more often than not, most of the courses, not certainly everyone, but probably 99.9% of them, are giving yardages to the center of the green. So that if the pin is cut in the front or in the back, that it could be 1 or even 2 club lengths difference. So that's important information to have. And again, the slope of the green and the position of the bunkers and any other hazards or traps that could be in its way. So you want to make sure that you've gathered as much information. And I think, guys, once we have that strategy, then playing to your strengths sort of takes over, because you can go back and say, okay, I know that, Peter, as you gave an example earlier on, one of your players, maybe one of your amateur players has got a great short game, but maybe can't hit very far off the tee. So he's going to leave the driver in the bag maybe, and he's going to take out an iron that's going to keep him in play in the fairway. So those are some good strategies, and he's playing to his strengths. So these are things that I think that a lot of amateur golfers, should be adhering to. Guys, I'm going to give each of you just a few moments to any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience, and then I'm going to give you another opportunity just to let the folks know where they can reach out. So, Peter, why don't you go first? Any final thoughts that you want to relay to the listeners out there as far as playing to their strengths and maybe putting together a good game plan?
No, I just, Ted, great topic today. I think this is, if we discuss this more, it leads a great conversation for other people, and I just encourage people to, work off confidence first. Where are you the most confident in your game?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you feel like, a particular shot that you're looking to play, or if you get in a situation where you have to make a decision, you can ask yourself, what shot am I most confident with? What club am I most confident with? Actually, you could start with, what club am I most confident with in this circumstance? And then you can make your decision on what kind of shot you're going to hit and how you're going to execute and what you can do to control your ball the best, and get as close to the hole as possible and enjoy your game more. But there's a lot of times that I see people that are out on the golf course and they're playing a shot that they feel like they're supposed to, or they should, that they've maybe never A, played before, or B, have absolutely no confidence in executing, and then they're leading themselves to a frustrating place. They're adding 2, 3, 4 more shots to their score for that particular hole, and then at that point you're inviting in more tension into their golf game and golf swing, and at that point, they're just not going to have a level of enjoyment. It's just not. So I think this is a great conversation for us to have today, and a definite a conversation that I have with all of my players on a regular basis.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it to the panel discussion tonight, as I thought it's, we often talk about so many other areas of the game and things that, different topics that we brought up here, and Pete, I'm going to come to you in just a second, and I think that this is an area that really, people have to be real about. We all have areas of our game that certainly could need improvement, and we get out in the golf course and hit some bad shots, but if we let that define our round, we're never going to improve. So focusing on the strengths that we have, capitalizing on those strengths whenever and wherever possible on the golf course is going to make overall a better round. Pete, some closing thoughts on that, and then I'll go back to Peter and let him share with the listeners how they can reach out to him and then to you as well.
Well, I agree a lot with what Peter said there, and it is a great topic and one that I think that can advance players, further along in their game, and some things that they probably haven't, thought about before, and giving them some strategies, some game plans, and really setting themselves up to actually play the course. Some of them just never do it. They just, you have those guys that you've seen it at your club, tee times at 9, they show up at 8:56, They roll a ball on the green, they run down there and they grab a tee and phew, off they go. There's no plan, there's no nothing. And then, talking about some different shots, talking about playing to your strengths all the time. I've always heard when I've been out on the course and a lot of times when I was doing the golf schools, doing course duty, here's something, hey, I saw this on TV, that to a double bogey for sure. Those are probably shots you shouldn't be trying, the ones that you're watching on TV, unless you've done them before. And I always tell them, I said, those shots that they pull off, they've practiced those. They don't just go out there in the heat of the moment and play a shot that they haven't practiced. They won't do that because they've got to have confidence in what they're doing. And a lot of times they'll say, you ever notice sometimes that, you'll see a player that hits it, to a side of the green way away from the pin, and you wonder, God, that was a missed shot. So you never know. That might be exactly where they felt the most comfortable playing it. And so, you don't know what their strategy is, so you have to understand, exactly where they're coming from. But I think overall, if they can just start to take a moment to look, especially those that play the same course all the time, what a great advantage that is. To take advantage of a course that that you play, go out in the evenings when it's late, when there's not many people around, and take 5 or 6 or 7 balls and just put them all around each green and figure out where all the breaks are. What's the ball do from here? What's it do from there? If you're playing that course a lot, you can get to where you're going to be really good at understanding what the greens are doing. And I think that's a great way to just take advantage of, the same course, the same play. And I think, too, I would always challenge my players. I said, go up from the front tees and tee off from there, and don't move back until you can shoot par for 9 holes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way. And that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was alluding to earlier, because you'll actually see the course from a different perspective. If you're advancing up, 2 tee blocks or what have you, it's amazing how much the course can change for you. And you're exactly right. If you're not able to make par or even get closer to par, moving up further, then obviously there's some areas of your game that need a lot of help. Right. Why are you playing from the back set of tees if you can't even make par from the front set of tees? So yeah, that's right. a good way to do it.
And one
guys,
thing,
I want to. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say one other thing. When I used to play scrambles a lot, where I was always the professional in the group, I would always ask the group, where are you guys most comfortable hitting into the green from? Because for me, bombing it down there, they may not be comfortable trying to pitch it in from 80 yards. I said, so right. I can pretty much hit any shot, so let me hit it where you guys are most comfortable, so you'll play better. And we always scored better when we did that. Play to their strengths. I can hit it from anywhere, but, they're limited. And so let's play to where you feel most comfortable playing into the greens from.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we used to do when we would play in scrambles or a best ball format for fun and or a corporate event, and we had our group put together. That's exactly what we did. Is we said to the guy that was great from 100 or 150 yards in, okay, you're going to be our go-to guy, and the guys that could hit it well off the tee, you're going to be our position guys. You're going to put us in position, and then hopefully we had a good putter or 2 or 3 of us were good putters or whatever the case may be. So yeah, we all played to our strengths as opposed to just sort of, as I said earlier, willy-nilly just getting up there and swinging for the hills. Guys, great discussion tonight, and just a sort of a precursor to things to come for the new year. One of the things that I'm going to be doing next year on the Coach's Corner panel. I did a little bit of this year. Some things didn't quite materialize quite the way I wanted to, but I know they're going to be there and set and carved in stone for next year. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have a former tour player who actually was a guest not too long ago is going to be coming on and joining us on the Coach's Corner panel and giving us an opportunity really to not only pick his brains, but talk about some of the things that some of the best players in the world face and deal with out there. So we're going to have some great discussions. And we're also going to bring in maybe a couple, but one for sure, an amateur golfer out there that's kind of a newbie to the game. We're going to bring them on the panel as well and give them an opportunity to maybe ask us some questions and also maybe do some on-air assessments. I know it's not always 100% accurate because we can't see them, but give us an opportunity to talk to some of the folks in that format as well. So I think it'll make for some interesting conversation. and discussions for our future Coaches Corner panels for next season. So you want to make sure you stick around. Guys, as always, thank you very much for joining me. And Peter, you go ahead first, and then Pete, I'll let you pick up the tail. Let the folks know how they can reach out if they want.
Yeah, Ted, thanks for having me. Thanks for doing this. I'm sure it's a lot of work, so I appreciate it. People can reach me. I'll be at Traconic Golf Club until the end of the season, so right up to mid-November. They can phone the golf shop there if they'd like, or they can visit my website. It's gogolfcoach.com. You can contact me through that. I'm also very active on social media. Instagram is at Daily Golf Coach, and Twitter is at Daily Golf Pro. And I'm also on Facebook for multiple accounts. But if Peter Egazarian, PGA and TPI Performance Coach is my Facebook fan page. But any questions, I'm happy to help, and please reach out. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, Peter, as always, thank you for joining me on the Coach's Corner panel. And Pete, how can the folks, those that want to, how can they reach out to you or maybe follow you and learn a little bit more about plain simple golf?
Oh, that's exactly where they can go. They can go to plainsimplegolf.com. It's PLANE for the plain. You'll see on there the little guides to all my other social media areas where they can catch me at. And they can contact me there, too. All my contact information's in there. Some good little tidbits that they can see. And we're revamping the website to move. And for 2018, we're really going to have a pretty good interactive website. So I'm looking forward to that, to try to touch base with more players and have more interactive stuff going on. But, yeah, all my contact info is there. And, again, Ted, really appreciate you doing this. It's a great forum for us to be on and talk about golf, but also for those listening in to really enhance what they're doing and really continue to grow the game. So thanks again for doing this.
Well, I appreciate it as always, guys. I have just as much fun, and I always I look at it this way. Just even though I teach and coach, a variety of different students. I always feel that this is an opportunity for me to learn some new things, which I always do. You guys provide some great information that I, in turn, use myself now. Over these last several years, I've learned a lot, and it's helped me to grow my game with my students as well. So I thank you guys for giving of your time, and we're gonna finish out obviously 2017 here. With a bang, as they say, and we're going to have some great things happening in 2018. So I hope both of you guys are going to be able to join back on the Coach's Corner panel and also as some guest spots as well. But guys, have a great weekend. Thank you as always. Again, it's been a pleasure.
You bet, Ted. Thanks again.
Yep. Thanks, Ted, you as well.
All right. Good night. All right. That was my special guest on the Coach's Corner panel. Peter Egazarian, and of course Pete Buchanan filling in for John Hughes tonight. Thanks, guys, for doing a great job, and we're going to continue that conversation, discussion again many times over the next months and years as well. I think playing to one's strategy and playing to one's strengths are vital for becoming a better golfer and a better professional as well. So something to think about. I'm going to be joined here in just a moment. I'm just waiting for him to come on board. But my very special guest tonight is the head coach for the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga men's golf team known as the Mocs. And he's going to be joining me here in just a moment. His name is Mark June. And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with him. And let me just tell you a little bit about him while I'm waiting. Again, his name is Mark June. He took the reins of the Chattanooga Mocs men's golf team in 2005 and led his alma mater to unprecedented heights in men's golf. He spearheaded a consistent presence in the national rankings, and under his guidance, the program thrives both on and off the course. His team has set records in competition as well as in the classroom, which is equally as important, of course. We'll talk to him a little bit about that. They're also active in the community with clinics and service activities, so he gets them out in the community and keeps them active that way as well as on the golf course. June's directed the Mocs to 17 team and 17 individual wins through 2016 and 2017, which include 5 Southern Conference championships, 2007 to 09 and 2012 to 13, and 1 NCAA Regional 2012 Bowling Green, along with the coveted 2008 Carpet Capital Collegiate crown. One of his prize pupils, Stephen Yeager, posted individual wins at conference and regional in leading Chattanooga to those titles in 2012. So lots of great accolades. He's also has been the SoCon, or Southern Conference Coach of the Year, in 2006, 7, 8, and 2012, and he was also the Eaton Golf Pride East Regional Coach of the Year in 2009. So a lot of accolades. So let me welcome my very special guest this evening from the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga, Mark June.
Hey, Ted, how you doing?
Good evening, Mark, and welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Well, I appreciate you giving of your time. I know it's not easy. I believe you guys are on fall break this week. Is that correct?
No, that's actually next Monday and Tuesday, and we'll be at a tournament. So it worked out good this year that they're not going to miss class on Monday and Tuesday. So,
well, that's perfect. Well, I've already taken an opportunity, Mark, to let the folks know a little bit about your background and some of the accolades, not only personally, but also your team has racked up. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But first and foremost, what I like to do, Mark, when I have a new guest on the show that's never been on, is give them an opportunity to sort of talk a little bit about how they were introduced to the game and roughly how old they were when they first sort of took up golf. So talk a little bit about how old you were and what drew you to the game of golf.
Well, it's kind of a different story. Nobody in my family really played any golf. My dad played like once a year, but my next door neighbor, his dad was one of the managers at a public course in town. So the easy thing to do with all of us boys in the neighborhood was take us out there and let us play golf all day. That way our moms didn't have to worry about where we were. So I guess I was probably 8, 9 years old, and that's kind of how I got started. And it was a little public course, no driving range, no teaching pros, nothing like that. We just played all day. And, if we needed golf balls, we found them in the ponds or the woods or wherever. And we kind of taught ourselves how to play. And there were some pretty good players that came out of that group. And we had a great time. And it was a lot of fond memories of that. We would hang out all day. This kind of shows my age. We would take quarters with us, and you could go in at the turn and get a Mayfield lemonade made by the same people make Mayfield milk in a little carton like you would get in elementary school, and we would get one of those at the turn every day. So I had like $1 at like 4 quarters, and I'd have like 4 of those each day. So that's what we did, and I couldn't have been 5 feet tall, not because I'm 5'6" now. So, and I played with men's clubs, and I've still got the putter, and the putter's probably 3 inches too long for me now. So I know it must have been something else when I was putting with it back then. So, but if we couldn't go there after we got started, we'd build golf courses in the neighborhood and between people's houses and stuff like that. So it was something that started out to be just a lot of fun, and just grew into a passion.
Right, and a lot of a lot of golfers out there kind of had very similar. I mean, some got into the junior programs and ultimately maybe went on and played collegiate golf as the students are that you're currently teaching, and others maybe went on to some of the mini tours and maybe even eventually into the PGA or LPGA, depending on where they were playing. But there's a lot of folks out there, too, that had very similar beginnings to you that just played on their local public course when an opportunity presented, and maybe necessarily didn't get a chance to play all the time, but gravitated the game through that method. So that's a very interesting backstory, and I appreciate you for sharing. Another interesting story, when I was researching for you coming on, Mark, I looked at obviously a lot of the notes and things that you have posted up on Chattanooga's website. And obviously your wife, Kelly, and you both graduated at Chattanooga UTC back in '84. Mm-hmm. And you currently reside in Hickson, Tennessee. What's kind of interesting about your story is you not only attended and graduated from UTC, but now you've come back to your alma mater to be the head coach of the men's golf team. That's got to be a little bit bittersweet, wouldn't you agree?
It is. It's great. I mean, Hickson is just a suburb of Chattanooga, so I've lived in Chattanooga ever since I started school back in 1980. So it is. It's my school, and I've had opportunities to leave, and I don't want to. I like living in Chattanooga, and it is neat to be at your school, and I've really enjoyed it, and it's been great watching the university grow. It's been great watching the athletic department grow. I remember I signed there and I wrestled there, which is another whole story. And back then all the coaches' offices were in a double wide trailer, so it's changed a lot, and the university's grown a lot, and it really is. It's really neat. It's a lot of fun to be there. We've had a couple other coaches that were here that were also UTC grads, and it's fun to we'll go to lunch and just walk around campus and kind of reminisce about the way it was and how good it is now. So it's a great place to be.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area, Chattanooga. I've been there many times and have some family up that way, so it's a very beautiful place and very lucky to have that opportunity. What was sort of the strategy? Obviously, you didn't have what we classify as I mentioned a moment ago, sort of the traditional golf upbringing. You weren't sort of mentored or tutored by coaches in that. So that's kind of a big shift to now come back and be the head coach. What was sort of your philosophy or game plan coming in once you went for that position? What was the thought process? Say, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's the way the team currently is and this program. What was your thought process on where I want it to grow and develop?
Well, I don't think I had a clue, to be honest with you. So, yeah, I thought I did. It was a very interesting start, and the gentleman that was before me, who is a very, very dear friend now, Coach Reed Sanderlin, was an English professor that got asked to be the golf coach. And at that time, he really didn't even play much golf. And when, I don't think he'd mind me telling this, when he retired and I took over, he was making like $6,000 a year to coach a golf team. So one thing he didn't know then that he does know now is after I got hurt when I was wrestling in college, and we were rooming with the golfers and had a lot of friends that were on the golf team. So when I couldn't wrestle anymore, I would go to golf practice sometimes with them. And, I was never on the golf team, but I would go to practice with him because he was always teaching and he wasn't at practice, so he didn't know. So, but, we got started and, I went to Reed. I'd owned a construction company for about 15 years, and I've been playing a lot of amateur golf, and I've been teaching on the side and not teaching, but running junior clinics and running junior tournaments and all that kind of stuff. And, I knew I wanted to get into golf and get out of what I was doing. And I went to Reed and I talked to him about it. I said, how can I go about getting into coaching? And we had become friends because, a lot of the guys on the team, even then I knew and had gotten to know Reed. And he said, well, I'm thinking about retiring. What about UTC? And I was like, well, it'd be great. I really don't know what I'm doing. If I could work for you for a year or two, that would be. So sure. I came in and, we started qualifying and, I thought we were doing pretty good. And we went to the first tournament and there were a lot of schools there I'd never heard of. So not knocking anybody or anything like that. There's a lot of, we played a lot of tournaments as we were coming up and guys would want to know where Chattanooga was. So, I thought we were going to do good. And, I was talking to a couple of friends of mine I played with here that played at UTC back in the 80s when I was there. And, I told them, we're ready and everything. Well, on the way home, I called a couple of them and I said, well, it didn't go so well. And they said, how'd you do? I said, we finished dead last. I need to figure out what this college golf thing's all about. So I started going to tournaments where there were SEC schools and schools like that around here because I could get to those tournaments and I'd just wear a Titleist hat and a golf shirt and I'd just go watch and started trying to figure out what those coaches were doing, and it kind of went from there. We came back and we were fortunate enough to get some good players. Got Ben Rickett, who is a great coach down at Dalton State now, number 2 team in NAIA, who was one of my first players, and Bryce Ledford and a guy named Jonathan Hodge, who's now full-time on the web.com. Just missed getting his tour card this year. And we kind of got started, and we started moving up, and we got inside 150, and then we got inside 100, and then we had a guy named Derek Rendy come along, and, you know, ended up being a 4-time all-conference guy, and he's at Q School right now. And, you know, and then Stephen Yeager, who is now on the PGA Tour, and all that kind of just kept getting put together, and we kept bringing in good players. And I figured out that I thought, you know, how am I going to help these guys get better? I had been teaching, but I knew that I didn't need players that I needed to teach. I knew those kind of guys weren't going to be good enough. You know, things I could help them with would be course management, you know, how to practice, how to set goals, how to work hard. And those were the things that I was trying to help them with. And I just thought, you know, we got to put this thing together so you can't leave here and say, I didn't get everything I needed to try to go play professional golf. So we brought in guys like Bob Winters, who's a sports psychologist out of Orlando, Randy Myers, who, you know, helped develop TPI and also Nike 360, and several other guys. And we tried to put a program together so that there was nothing here the guys didn't need. And we have a great donor who helped us. You know, we bought a 9-hole golf course and turned it into a great practice facility. Bill Bergen redesigned it for us. We've got 2 wedge ranges plus 3 holes, and I mean it's a 33-acre. I mean it's a fantastic deal for us. And so, you know, and actually a lot of the guys have moved back. Stephen Fox, who won the U.S. Amateur, just bought a house here. Stephen Fox did. Stephen Yeager has bought a house here, who plays on the PGA Tour. Derek's here. Bryce is still here. A lot of these guys all still live here because they got such great golf courses and the practice facility. And it's a pretty good place to, you know, it's pretty centrally located. You know, you can get to Atlanta quick or Knoxville and get out of here and fly pretty much anywhere you need to go. So, but that was kind of the mindset that I wanted to put together something that would give the guys everything they needed to see how good they could become. And I tell them all the time, I say, it doesn't matter who you play for. It doesn't matter what coach in the country, and there's some great ones out there. None of us can make you great. It's all on you. All we can do is supply what's needed. And there for a while we got a lot of guys that came in that wanted to be good. They had a chip on their shoulder. They wanted to prove that everybody else messed up not taking them, and it got to be a lot of fun. So that was kind of my philosophy when I kind of figured out what needed to be done and what we could do at Chattanooga different than, say, a lot of the bigger schools that have different resources and different ways to recruit and do things. So that was kind of where I backed up and tried to go.
Right, and you know, that raises an interesting question, what you just mentioned about some of the players coming in with a chip. You know, what a lot of people don't understand is, you know, with what you're dealing with is a little bit different than traditional. Traditionally most people think of golf as an individual sport, but now you've got to put, a group of players together, and they've got to work together as a team. Even though they're, a lot of times they're playing in individual competitions, they still have to work and support, much like you would see, on the President's Cup or the Ryder Cup. They've got to be there to support one another. How do you handle a situation when you've got a player or more than one player that's coming in that's sort of not meshing well? I mean, we've seen that even in the players, or not the players, but the Ryder Cup, where players that as an individual are phenomenal. Tiger Woods comes to mind. Put them in a format where it's now a team environment, and they're not really there pulling all cylinders together. How do you handle players like that, and what do you do to get them on a better track that's going to benefit the team overall?
Well, now you're asking me to give up some secrets. I hope none of the guys are listening, or future recruits, because I've got 2 right now that are that way, and it's taken all of a month, and now I think they're best buddies. But the biggest thing for these guys coming out is everybody was the best player on their high school team, and then they walk into a situation where everybody was the best player on their high school team.
Right.
And, they're not used to being the 4-man or the 2-man or the 8-man. And it's it's tough on a lot of them. It's tough on a lot of them's egos. And the bad thing about it is high school golf, really across the country, you have select teams that are pretty good where you'll have more than one good player on a team. But, I just got back from the state tournament. You got one guy that can shoot even par, and the rest of them are trying to shoot 75 or 8 or 81 and help the team out, and they're never going to play college golf. So when they get to college, it's the first time where they've been on a team where they don't want to let everybody else down. They used to be in a situation where they were hoping somebody else could help them. Now they don't want to let anybody down, and that's probably one of the biggest adjustments they have. But sometimes, like you alluded to, there is a little bit of ego with some of them, and then there's also they see these new guys coming in, and they don't want somebody taking their spot. I had one coming in this year that, and both of these guys are great kids. One's a freshman, one's a little older, and they ended up rooming together. And the freshman didn't think the older one liked him at all or anything like that. So I made the older one his mentor. Now they practice together every day. They go eat dinner. They hang out all the time. I mean, now they're best buddies because the older one is taking the younger one on and trying to help him come along. So instead of them fighting with each other, it gets them to helping each other, and that is good. But then at the same time, as a golf coach, and kind of take that back to wrestling, and in both sports, there's qualifying to get your spot. You got to turn around, and even though he might be your roommate and your best friend, you got to try to cut his throat out. You got to try to stomp his heart in the ground, and we talk about that. Right up until we tee off, all these guys are your best friends, and they will be again tonight. But for these 4 or 5 hours, you got to want to destroy them, and I mean absolutely destroy them. Not beat them by one, but just run them in the ground so they never want to play you again. And we preach that a lot, and that's what we try to get our guys to believe, so that when they're playing with other teams out there, it's not a friendly competition. The thing, I've wrestled in several national championships. I've played golf in one, and I've coached in quite a few, and I fished with the best in the world on the FLW tour. One thing about all the best in the world is they all want to beat your brains in. They'll be nice to you at times, but they all want to beat your brains in, and that's the attitude that you're trying to get. You're trying to get them to mesh together as a team, but more importantly, to be ultra competitive with each other. We'll go back to Steven Yeager, who's on the PGA Tour now. He would come to me and say, "Hey, Coach, can we qualify today? I want to see how bad I can beat everybody." Right. I was like, okay. And we would set things up like, okay, if you get this many ahead, you're out. So instead of just winning qualifying, he was trying to get 17 shots ahead in 3 rounds of the 5th place guy, so he could be out of qualifying. So you're trying to build that kind of competitiveness in them. We do that in the weight room a lot too. Our weight room time, and I actually had Derek Rendy come up to me the other day, and he told me, he said, my whole first year, Coach, I didn't like you at all, and I thought you were crazy. Because the stuff we were doing in the weight room, he goes, and he's a multi-sport athlete. He's a phenomenal athlete. He said, I just really didn't like you, and I played so good that year too. I was like, man, I wished I'd known. I'd have made it where you didn't like me all the way through. But, now we laugh about it. He's, Derek's older and I'm older, and both of us have learned a lot, hopefully. But, he was a great player for me. But we do that, and sometimes the younger guys don't understand. They're like, why am I doing this for golf? Well, the reason you're doing it is to get more mentally tough. Is to prove to yourself you can do things you never thought you could do before. And
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. What I was going to say is what a lot of people don't understand is golf in many ways, Mark, really mimics life. When you're out in the golf course, you're faced with a lot of challenges out in a golf course, much like you are in life, and the person that can best navigate those challenges is the one that's going to come out on top. And sometimes you have to make decisions, and you have to take steps that are not always going to be popular with your teammates. But if you've got a goal in mind and a strategy in mind, and you stick to that, ultimately you're going to come out on top. And that's not an easy thing in an environment that you're teaching, because obviously you don't want them to actually hate one another, but they've got to be willing, when they get on that golf course, they got to flick a switch, and now they're competing against one another. And when they come off, they can shake hands and, hey, great round, and gave it your best, but, I'm up by such and such and whatever. You have to be able to flick that switch when the time is needed, and it sounds like you've been doing that very well with a lot of your students.
Well, we try, and different guys have different personalities, and it takes some of them longer than it does others, and so it's you can't treat everybody the same, and that's and you can't coach everybody the same. That's one thing about golfers and it is about any sport. I was in that generation where, boys, we played every sport. I played every sport, whatever season it was, that's the sport I was playing. And, the thing about wrestling and the thing about golf is it is, to me, so much more mental than
Yes.
a lot of other sports. Even though they're mental, when I played football, it just happened. The whistle blew or the ball was snapped, and it just, everything was just a response based on what was going on in front of you. And wrestling
Sure.
can be that way too at times, but it's also really mental, when you're facing somebody else one-on-one. But golf gives us way too much time to think. We get all this time in between shots, and we get to stand there and look at it and think about all the bad things that can happen. And so to me, it's probably one of the most mental sports out there. That and tournament fishing, professional fishing. It's funny, our sports psychologist handles two athletes, and it's fishermen and golfers. And I think we're the most mental cases out of any athletes out there. So, yeah.
Well, Mark, the interesting thing, when I looked at a lot of the stats, just to give the folks an example here, just to show how really a great job you've done here, is you've got some very impressive stats. As I mentioned, from 2016 to 2017, 17 team and 17 individual wins, including 5 Southern Conference championships. And as you already mentioned, Stephen Fox was a standout in 2012. He won the United States Amateur Championship. So you've got some great examples. But having said that, it's not all about golf, because you also have them involved in some community, doing some clinics and other service activities. Why was that important to you?
Well, again, you alluded to it earlier. It's about teaching these guys how to be great people, not just great golfers, because very few of them are going to ever get as far down the path as Stephen Yeager's got, or the guys that we are watching on TV every week. Hopefully in a few weeks we'll be watching Stephen. He had a great first tournament at Safeway, but even for those guys that make it, it's about being, for me now, 15 years later, I start looking at these guys and, what kind of parents are they becoming? What kind of husbands are they becoming? If they're working for somebody, how are they doing in their professional life? And, one thing about it, I've had a couple of guys in town, they'll ask me to take somebody to play golf and, just kind of put the whole thing together, and we go so they can really evaluate that person on the golf course. So golf shows a lot of faults and a lot of strengths. And, being a coach and having these guys from 18 to 22, and, you're really trying to help them become the kind of people that you'll be proud to know. And that's one of the biggest things about it. I love seeing my guys. I love talking to them now that some of them have young families and are doing well. And, it's neat when one of them calls me and says, "Hey, Coach, I just got promoted in my job," or, those kind of things are important. And I'll tell you, day one, it wasn't. It was all about winning SoCon championships and trophies and shooting 66 and everything else. And it still is. That's still my job. But at the same time, at the end of the day, I look back at a lot of guys that were here that contributed a lot more than I thought they did at the time, and how they've turned out and the kind of people they've turned out to be. And to me, that's one thing that I'm really proud of. And, we do some things in the community, like you said, and we've been involved with different things with CHIPS, with Down syndrome kids. We do other different things like, we have the Jack McKenna Day, which is junior golf. And we're going to be doing a lot more this year with our facility. We used to have a first tee program here, and they're gone. So now we're going to start doing a lot more junior golf stuff here in town. But also just various things, being student athletes, they don't have a lot of extra time. So, if we can find something that takes 2 hours where we can go out and help somebody or do something, I think those things are important for these guys to realize that it's not all about them. They're very privileged to be a student athlete. And,
right.
Along with that goes a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, they have to learn to give back. You're exactly right. You mentioned, I was going to ask, it was going to be my next question anyways, but obviously the city of Chattanooga's Parks and Recreations has a CHIPS program. Tell us a little bit about the program and how you're involving your students in that.
Well, I can take absolutely zero credit for it because Ben Rickett and Stephen Yeager came in and if you know Stephen, it wasn't one of those things where he asked and said, "Hey, Coach, can we do this?" He said, "Coach, we are going to be doing this on Tuesday nights." And, it was a good thing. Stephen and Ben put that together, and it, when I would go out, and I'm serious, I wouldn't even tell them which guys are going. I would stand back, and I love to go over there and watch because I love to watch my guys interact with them and how they were. I can take zero credit for that. They did it all. The guys did it all, and that's one of those things that you're really proud of because it's not something I made them do. It's something they did on their own, and it's a great. It's a great outlet. Being around those kids, they are so loving and competitive. Right. It's really neat. It's I've learned so much about kids with Down syndrome, and it really is. It's something else. I can't even put it in words. It's just really special to sit back and watch our young men work with those kids, and we need to do so much more. We really do, and. It's hard sometimes with all their class schedules and night classes and everything going on. But I got to hand it to Stephen and Ben. When they took that on, they went full force and they did a great job with it. It's a great program, and what they do is fantastic.
Yeah, and there's nothing better. There's really no greater satisfaction than doing something, especially to give back in your community to those that maybe have some disadvantages. To be able to do that, I think that speaks volumes. So let me ask you then, Mark, in hindsight now, you said a moment ago, in the beginning it was, all about the wins and that sort of thing. And as I mentioned in the opening credits, you've won and received some personal accomplishments, the SoCon Coach of the Year, 4 years, Eaton Golf Pride East Regional Coach of the Year in 2009. Do they have a different meaning for you now? That you've had some time to reflect and grow in your own way as coach of the team? Does it have a different meaning for you now than maybe what it did at the time when you first got them?
Yes, it did, and and this is, I hate to admit it, but I hope this is part of me maturing. I thought I won those awards then. I didn't. Those guys, the only reason those things are on my wall are the guys that were on my teams. Without them, without their hard work, without what they did, those aren't my awards. Those are theirs. And, I didn't hit a shot, and so, I do look at a lot of it very differently now than I did when I first started. And it's, so you're right. Those things are neat. If I win 5 more of them, that's 5 more the guys won. If I don't win another one, that really doesn't matter. It's, as long as they show up every day, they give effort every day, and they come out of here, better people, better golfers. They graduate. That's, those are the important things to me. And I know if there's any of my close friends out there listening, they're all going, he is so full of it right now because he can't play tag football with 2 6-year-olds and not try to take them out. Because I am just that I can't do anything. I started, and so, but it is. I try to keep it more in perspective now and realize that, what we're trying to do for these young men is, and my faith is very important to me. And if that translates to them, I'm very involved with FCA. I'm on their board, and I'm very, very proud of that, more so than those other awards you're talking about, because that's a way that I can give back and I can help other people. We have a great thing in college golf, because College Golf Fellowship, that's our own version of FCA, which is fantastic. And, those kind of things for these guys I think is really important at this stage of their life. I think it gives them a lot of direction. Some of them, need that. It's funny, I've had some international guys come over here and go, golly, then, Chattanooga, y'all got a church on every corner. But, and some of those guys have gotten very involved in these programs and are still involved now after college, which is really neat as a coach to see. So, for that reason, there's a lot of guys that I probably should be calling tonight and tell them how proud I am of them, because they were here, but they might have been that 6th or 7th guy for most of their career, and may not feel like they did a whole lot, but they'll never know how much they did while they were here. So it's pretty neat.
I think too, Mark, that you're exactly right. I think, Mark, too, really, when you put things in perspective, it's not so much, you're really not just teaching them about golf. You're teaching them about preparing for life and the challenges that they're going to be faced with. Golf just happens to be the vessel that you're using in order to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, golf mimics life in so many ways. If you really stop and think about a round of golf and what you're faced with, the different challenges and obstacles that you're faced with every day that you're out in the golf course, it's parallels very much. You have your good days and you have your bad days, much like you do in life. And a lot of times you've got to really dig deep internally to be able to, pull through and finish the round. And other times you just feel like, chucking your clubs and the golf balls into the first pond you come across. And I'm sure there's been a lot of guys on the team that have had those moments. So it's really a testament, right? And I'm right. So it's really,
absolutely.
To be honest, Mark, you're exactly, I'm right. You're not just their coach, but you're a leader. You're an example for them to really look at. And that doesn't mean you're perfect, because we all know you're not perfect. I'm not perfect.
No.
But those boys look up to you and say, okay, this is how I want to live my life and how I want to be able to navigate and how I want to handle myself. And yes, I'm going to be competitive at times, and yes, I'm going to be challenged at times. But that's really what you're preparing for, is these young men as they move on to the next phase of their life. And golf is just, as I said, the vessel that you're using to do that.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you 100%. It's, I had, I've probably been coaching for about 2 years, and an older gentleman here in town that I've known for a long time and, really respected, came out and just rode around with me one day at practice. And he talked about that very thing, and I was driving home that night thinking, what have I gotten myself into? I thought I was just going to be a golf coach. So,
right.
It is. And, some of my guys are, and, we have some different rules that you won't see with a lot of teams or a lot of places. And sometimes my guys, I know they think I'm crazy, and they think, why am I doing this? Why does coach care about these kind of things? Why does this matter? If my guys go inside a building, the hat comes off. And
yes.
I said, guys, you don't understand at this time. And they look around, and there's other coaches standing there with baseball caps on. And I'm like, guys,
mm-hmm.
but that's not you. And I said, you're
that's
not
right.
going to do this. And what they don't realize is that the guys that are going to be hiring them, golf is a great tool to find a job. And the way you conduct yourself all the time at these country clubs where these kids are at, the members are watching, and the members are a lot of times the ones that hire these athletes. And when they see a kid that is respectful, a kid that takes his hat off, a kid that does things right, and I call them kids, a young man, he's already 2 steps ahead of the next one. You know, and that kid that's got his hat on backwards walking through the building, he's got no job. His daddy better own the business or he's not going to work. And, you know, I've watched that happen over and over, you know, and, you know, that's one of those, it's just those little things that I make my guys do that, you know, and I know at times they're, you know, coach, my hair's messed up. I said, well, then cut it off like mine. You won't have to worry about it. You know, so, you know, just shave it all off and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Right. But, you know, and, you know, it is another form of discipline. And the discipline, if you can't have the discipline in all parts of your life, you're not going to be successful really in any part of your life. And, you know, I just believe that. And we're all not 4.0 students, and we're all not perfect, like you said before. But, you know, people that are successful usually try to do everything right. We're better at some things than others, but we usually try to do everything right.
Right. And you know, and you're teaching them integrity too, Mark. I mean, you know, that's really the key thing. If you look at many of the professionals, you know, you look at Jack Nicklaus and of course the late Arnold Palmer, and many others that, you know, played when I was growing up. You know, you looked at how they conducted themselves publicly and how they handled themselves. I mean, they always put their best foot forward, and that's why they rose to the level. It wasn't just their golf game that took them to those heights. I mean, Arnold Palmer was one of the most recognized individuals worldwide, not just for golf, but just for his likability and his marketability, because people just respected him as an individual. They liked him as a person, not just because he was a great golfer. He didn't win all of the golf tournaments or more than everybody else, but it's how he handled himself day to day that really allowed people to gravitate to him and respect him. Even to this day, you know, that he's been gone now for a little while, people still talk about him, and there's a fondness. There's not, well, that, you know, whatever, or they're not using some derogatory. I mean, I've never in my entire life, and I'm going to be 54 in the new year, have I ever heard anybody say a derogatory comment about Arnold Palmer. So this is something that you're, this is something that you're instilling in these young men. The other thing too, you know, Mark, that I think that a lot of people don't understand that these young men are going to be faced with is the challenges of an ever-changing world. And I'm sure you've had to deal with this on some level, things like social media and you know, iPhones and iPads and all of this other stuff. Is there a tone that you set with the players? I mean, you can't stop them completely, but is there a time and a place that, hey, it's okay, and how you present yourself in these different mediums is important, not only to you as an individual, but also to UTC. We want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. It's very easy to get caught up in the trappings of social media.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have very few rules when they come in, but my first rule pretty much covers all of it. If you wouldn't say it or do it in front of your mom, then don't do it.
Right. Right.
So that pretty much, so, you know, and and that's something that coming back, and when, you know, when something happens, you know, that's where I go with it. If, you know, if you've done something that's going to embarrass our team and then our university and your parents, then we got a bad problem. And, you know, and that includes social media, and we talk about that. And I want them to use social media. I am awful at it. I can barely follow my Twitter account that was set up for me. I didn't set it up. I do have a Facebook thing. The only thing I really know how to do is like something. So, you know, don't be offended if I don't put your pictures up and things, because I don't know how. But I do think it is extremely important in this age, and especially for that age. My wife is an advertising artist, so I know through those mediums what's important, and, you know, she and I talk about it. And it's great for them to tweet out and to all the other things about our program, about good things that we're doing and things that are going well, and for them to be proud of where they're at and what they're doing, what they're accomplishing. I want all that to go out. I mean, it's great for recruiting, but it's also it's great for our school. It's great for them, so, while it is a huge part of our world, and, I'm one of those coaches that for a long time I was like, no phones at practice and no headphones while you're hitting balls, and know that, you know what? That's the way these kids grew up, and it's a different deal because, and my generation, we look at that, we think you can't be concentrating, but I watch these kids study with headphones on and stuff. There's no way I could have done that. I'm trying to understand them a little better, but at the same time, we still have times where we put the phones down so that we have to talk to each other. But,
sure.
There is need, or if you're on your phone and, something's funny, you need to share it with everybody at the table, not just the guy sitting beside you because you don't want everybody else to see it. If it's funny and you're laughing, you need to be able to share it with everybody. And, but we do try to have a lot of fun. There's no doubt. I mean, it's got to be fun. There's way too much work. As there's a 20-hour rule in NCAA, so, you can't make them practice or work out or watch film or do anything else in any sport more than 20 hours a week. I can tell you that right now, there is not a great athlete out there that's putting in 20 hours a week in any sport. They're putting in way more than that. And that's, it's not required by the coach. It's not mandatory, but that's, they want to be successful and they understand what it takes. And all of my guys put in a lot more than 20 hours. And, so, it's, to take all their social media and everything away from them and, I'm not sure that that's a good thing as much as they're out there, as much as they put into it. So it's, the whole world's changing rapidly, and the game of golf has changed so much in 15 years, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and you have to have balance. I mean, you have to have balance in life, and you're right. The world is changing. I've gotten pretty good on social media, obviously, from doing this show. I've had to, learn some additional skills in order to be able to get the broadcasts out there and to promote it and so forth. So I've gotten pretty certainly savvy, but I'm sure there's some, 8-year-old out there that could probably run circles around me. So I don't try to do anything too fancy, but you're right. I mean, it is a changing world. I want to end with this last question here, or just a comment, and then let you expand on it. But I see also from some of the excerpts of the bio that I got that you also qualified for the 2015 PGA Senior National Championship. Any thoughts of pursuing something a little bit later on in your career, maybe a competitive challenge, perhaps?
I just got my amateur status back. I'm 55, and you know what? All the guys I couldn't beat at 30, I couldn't beat at 50. And there's so many guys in town I still can't beat. So there's, it's funny. Like I told you, if there's something that I will do after I retire from here, it would be a really high level of probably competitive fishing. I do fish on the FLW Tour, which is one of the biggest tours out there, in my spare time. So I don't do it for a living, and those guys are just like professional golfers. Most of them are starving to death. But I love to play. I love to compete. I got my amateur status back, so I will try to qualify for senior opens and senior AMs and things like that. So because I still love to play. I enjoy practicing. I'm not one of those coaches if I play with my guys, it's twice a month. I feel like it's when we're at practice, it's my time to help them be better, not my time to make myself better. So only if we have a fun day where we go to a golf course that we don't ever go to just as a treat or something like that, will I play with them, but it's rare. Occasionally on Sundays, I'll have a couple of them say, hey, I want to work on something. Let's go play 9 holes. I don't, so I don't have the time to practice, like a lot of guys do. That most of my peers that are trying to play at a decently high level at our age practice and play a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I might practice one day a week. So it's but I did enjoy playing in the senior PGA, and that was a goal. And after I accomplished that, I was like, I'm going to go back to playing amateur golf and playing a lot of things in Tennessee with guys that I grew up with and been friends with all my life,
Sure.
and enjoying that kind of competitive golf now. I do think it's important to keep playing, though, because
yes.
sometimes when I go a while without playing, I forget how hard it is. A good friend of mine,
right.
Joe Inman, who played the tour his whole life and played the senior tour and now is a coach at Georgia State, keeps telling me, Mark, you got to remember how hard this game is. It's the hardest game in the world. And I thought, wait a minute. You won on those tours. It can't be that hard for you. but no, it is. And, when you quit playing, you forget how hard it is sometimes. So I think that helps me to understand the guys a little bit from time to time.
Yeah, well said. Well, Mark, I want to thank you for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. I appreciate you doing this and giving of your time. And I know it's not always easy when you got a full plate during the day of teaching and coaching and all that. But thank you. It's been an interesting conversation, and I'd like to extend an invitation. We'll set this up down the road, but maybe sometime in 2018 you can come back and maybe we'll get a few of the players to come on with you and just talk about some of the goings on, if you will, throughout the season, if you'd like to do that.
Absolutely. I think I would love to hear you interview some of them and I'd like to hear what they have to say. Sometimes they don't tell the head coach everything, which I know when I was in college I wasn't telling him everything either. So
no,
I might not want
sure.
to know what they say, but no, we've got a great bunch of young men right now and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for the next few years.
Well,
we're pretty young, but
Mark,
I really like what we got. Okay.
Well, it sounds like you've got a great formula for success at UTC, and as I said in the beginning, what a great opportunity for you to come back at your alma mater and be able to play at the college that you graduated from. So, a job well done, and continue the hard work and much continued success. And Mark, I would really love to have you come back. Maybe sometime in the new year if you're so inclined. And as I said, we'll maybe get a few of the boys to join you. And you may have to plug your ears during their part of the segment, but we'll have a good time anyway. So I'll be in touch with you, Mark, and I appreciate you coming on tonight here on Golf Talk Live.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me, and that sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. I really appreciate you having me on tonight.
All right. You have a great weekend and much continued success with the team.
Thank you. All right. Good night.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. That was my very special guest, Mark June, the head coach for the University of Chattanooga up in Tennessee, the men's golf team. Sounds like he's doing some great work, teaching them not just about how to play this great game, but also a little bit about life along the way. And it sounds like he's doing a phenomenal job there. So we'll have him back in the new year when his schedule permits, and maybe get, as I said, a couple of the guys to join in as well. And maybe they can share a few secrets along the way. We'll see what happens. But on that note, I want to take this opportunity to once again thank the guys on the Coach's Corner panel tonight, Peter Egazarian, and again, Pete Buchanan for stepping up last minute and filling in for one of my absentees. But guys, you did a fantastic job as always, and we're going to continue the discussion next week on Coach's Corner. We'll have a whole new panel on there. And actually, John, as a sign of good faith, since he wasn't able to join us this week, John Hughes, I'm referring to, PGA Master Professional from Orlando, he's going to come on as my guest next week and redeem himself, if you will, for not being able to. All kidding aside, John, I know these things happen, but he's going to be on next week to join me as my special guest, and we've got some great things that we're going to line up and have in our discussion next Thursday, so make sure you join us. But on that note, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the listeners worldwide for faithfully tuning into Golf Talk Live each and every week, and it's really through your faithfulness, I guess, and tuning in. And it's also given me a great amount of pleasure and enjoyment of having a number of highly talented coaches, teacher professionals, authors, and entrepreneurs like my very special guest tonight, Mark June, for them stopping by Golf Talk Live. And it's really through their participation and guest appearances that make it a first-class show. A special thanks to some of the sponsors and supporters of the show, Mr. Jonathan Laird, owner of and editor of South Coast Golf Guide. Go to southcoastgolfguide.com if you're interested in finding out some of the great golf tracks here in the southeastern part of the United States, from Texas right over here to the northwest part of Florida and all states in between. A lot of great courses there. You can check it out online, or you can request a copy of the guide if you're not in the area. He'll actually have one shipped out to you. But if you're planning on a visit down here, you want to get your hot little hands on a copy of that, go to the website first, southcoastgolfguide.com, and check it out. And get a copy, or find out where you can pick up a copy once you get down here, and then you'll have that with all the information, some of the great local courses and that you might want to play while you're here having your vacation, or maybe you're coming down here for the winter months. They're going to be shortly around the corner here, so if you're planning on doing that, make sure you get a copy. So go to southcoastgolfguide.com. Also to Meredith Kirk from Meredith Kirk Golf out in Myrtle Beach. Go to meredithkirk.com is her website, a great LPGA teacher professional in the south here in the Myrtle Beach area. Make sure you check her out. Nikki and Tiffany Litherland. Nikki, of course, is a great golf professional, and his lovely wife, Tiffany Litherland, for all of their help in spreading the word about the program. Thanks for all of your continued support. Mr. Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf. Go to onticgolf.com and check out a great line of customized putters. If you're in the market for a new putter, make sure you stop at onticgolf.com first to check them out. Sean Kelly, of course, the owner of linkedgolfers.com, his own social media website platform, if you will. Sean, of course, was the manager of a great and actually the largest golf group in LinkedIn.com called Linked Golfers. Last count, I think there was over 45,000 members of that group. It's the largest golf group on the LinkedIn social media, so you want to check that out as well. And go to linkedgolfers.com, which is his platform and an own social media website. And last but not least, my good friend, Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions over in Ireland, great teacher professional and also club fitter over there. Make sure that you check out Doyle Golf Solutions. And Peter, thank you for all of your continued support. And on that note, God bless everybody. Have a great week, and thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week right here on Golf Talk Live.